It is 1:00. All right.
PM.
Well, welcome everyone to our 1 year anniversary bonanza celebration. We're Watch Me Learning Services. I am Julie Allen, the Chief Learning Officer.
And I am Rachel Martinez, the Chief Operations Officer.
Yeah, and so we work with companies and organizations to build online professional development courses and training. So if you're struggling to onboard people, if you're struggling to keep people up to date on their skills, if you have something that you need to teach folks, especially as you're scaling your business or organization, we would love to help you. That's what we do. That's what we've done for a long time, and super excited to be here. So again, as we were mentioning a little bit earlier, this is our 1 year. Tomorrow is technically our 1 year anniversary in business, and we have learned a lot. I mean, we're certainly still continuing to learn, but we have learned a lot in our 1 year that we would really like to share with folks. So I can go ahead and get started if you want.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Julie.
So
take it away.
So the first thing that I really wanted to discuss, we are a partnership. That's our business structure. Although we'll probably talk about this a little bit later, we are in the process of changing. We filed as a C corp originally. We really should be a partnership. So that's a lesson learned. Definitely do
right off the bat.
check with an accountant before you sign up for a business structure, so that you make sure that you're filing you're at the best advantage for your taxing structure purposes, filing purposes. But yeah, so we are a partnership, and we kind of, I think, as a lot of people do, kind of just jumped in gung ho, and then as we went along, found out that we really needed to create an operating agreement, which just basically we joke, it's kind of like getting married. It's almost like
like Julie and I, we always joke that we're business married. Like, we very much are legally bound in lots of different ways through this business and this operating agreement. And so I think probably one of the lessons that we're going to touch on today is the importance of that agreement, which basically dictates how you run your business.
Yes, it dictates the percentage of who owns what, right? Like how we govern decisions, or how we make decisions. Like, essentially, like, we agreed in our operating agreement that it would have to be a vote, an equal vote. We each have an equal say in the decisions that we make. We also kind of wanted to afford for potentially bringing on another partner at some point, so we laid out the processes for adding additional partners. It's really unfortunate to think about, right? Like, no one wants to think about this, especially when you're building a business. But, in talking to other folks, we realize, like, you do need to have a mechanism for, we definitely know for essentially kicking people out or removing them, so to speak, from the organization. We've talked to some folks who've had business partners embezzle. We've talked to folks who have, just done some really shady things. So, like, unfortunate. And we found out the hard way, like, if you don't have that in your operating agreement when you sign it, you cannot remove people. You have to dissolve LLC, or you have to dissolve your organization, which, especially if you have multiple, I guess it would be multiple partners. You might not want to dissolve your LLC, especially if you've really worked hard to establish it. If you have 4 partners and one person is doing something really unethical, right? Like, you don't want to be in a position where you have to dissolve your business.
To be clear, that did not happen with us.
No.
Not to disparage this other person that we had in our partnership. It was just, different life paths, and there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, the way that there was no room even for that in the agreement. So
this is all like other people that we talk to be clear. Like, but it is unfortunately a reality that does sometimes happen. So having an operating agreement is really important. The other thing that was really interesting that I think would be of use to folks who are going into a partnership is that each person's spouse is basically a silent partner in the business, which we didn't think about. I'm married, Rachel isn't, and I didn't think about including my spouse. Like, I just didn't think about the fact that, like, my spouse would be a silent partner. And, it's kind of one of those strange things you start to think about. Well, again, going down the kind of like dark path of what if, like, if I died, what would happen, right? Like, and then of course too, you also think about, like, what happens if you split up, like all these things, right? So we obviously hired a lawyer to create our operating agreement, and she recommended that my spouse sign an addendum to our operating agreement, just basically saying that, like, yeah, if I passed away, that he would be bound to sell at the fair market price, which again was governed by our operating agreement, but that he would be bound to sell his stakes in the company, which that was important to me because I did want him to have something, right? If I passed, but also this isn't his area of expertise, so it wouldn't make sense for him to be your partner in this venture.
Right, but it was a lot of really hard conversations. I remember when we were coming up with a list of things that we wanted to include in this operating agreement. It was like, I mean, I remember we were on your couch.
Oh yeah,
we were just like,
I think I was laying down at one point, like the fainting couch, just like
we were really. It was really emotionally taxing. Sarah Southern, hi. Okay, so Sarah Southern has a question. She says, did either of you have any business experience before this one, or has a lot been learning on the fly? That is a great question, Sarah.
No, that is a fantastic question. I had spent a year as a freelancer, which is very different than running a business. Definitely very different than running a partnership. And in fact, I was freelancing with one client on the regular, and that client unfortunately lost their venture capital, and so I was kind of at this junction where I had to either really make a go of it, like really start my own LLC, like really go after it, or find a full-time job, and I ended up finding a full-time job. So this is my first.
No, I don't have any business experience, especially running my own business. I like to think that I come from a very entrepreneurial family. I think my grandmother's family had a grocery store here in Phoenix, but that was like literally 100 years ago. So I only heard stories about things. I also have family members who are professionals and have their own offices. I have a cousin who's a lawyer, two cousins who are lawyers. One owns her own practice, but so I did get a lot of pointers from them, but it has been a lot of learning on the fly. The way that we like to say is we're building the plane as we're flying it.
For sure.
And I think that it's one of those things, like, emotionally, like if we knew all of what we know now, I don't know if we would have done it.
But yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that that I think we should talk about for sure. I just wanted to wrap up my thought before I forget.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
We do that a lot.
Yeah, we probably will do that a lot. Just if you're going into business with a partner, think very carefully about their spouse if they're married, right? Because they are a silent partner. You definitely want. I would probably, now knowing what we know now, if I were to form another business with a partner and they were married, like I probably wouldn't do business with that person if their spouse was not willing to sign an addendum. So that's all. That was just the final thought that I wanted to make.
That brings up another thought, man. So like you're gonna have to get my future spouse is gonna have to get your approval.
Sorry. No, I do not approve.
It's a no-go. Julie doesn't approve. We can't do it. We can't move forward in this relationship.
Oh my God, I have so much power. Just kidding. But no, I mean, it is something to think about, and I think that's something that people don't think about. I didn't know that when we formed, but yeah, to the point that you just made, like this has challenged me in ways that I was not necessarily prepared, like emotionally prepared. Like I feel like I have an existential crisis at least once a week, just because you really do. You will be pushed in different directions that, I got into this, like we started this because like I really love instructional design. I really love working with people to create learning experiences and, specifically online learning experiences. I really love, like, there's always some kind of skill gap, right? There's some kind of problem that you're trying to fix. And I really find that satisfying to like dig into that and like figure out like, okay, so like, how do we solve this? Like, how do we create the experiences online that are going to allow people to to practice those skills to make sure that they're overcoming that skill gap. And that's what I wanted to do, right? It was like, yeah, let's start this business so that we can do that thing. And then now it's like, oh, now we're doing marketing, and now we're doing,
we're doing accounting.
We're doing accounting. We're doing,
yeah,
we're having long calls with the IRS. We're having,
Jeez,
but I think also too, it just really pushed me so far outside of my area of expertise, so far outside of what I felt comfortable doing. And that's really hard. It's really rewarding too, because now on the eve of a year, right, I feel like I have this whole slew of skill sets that I didn't have before. So it's definitely rewarding, but there are times where you're really going to go through it and you are going to feel like, what have I done?
Yeah. I think that like we've been talking a lot about just like what our why is and who we're serving, which are really important basic questions. And I think that people, when they start this business, they kind of gloss over it. But I think it's important to like talk about our origin story too, our villain origin story. So when Julie and I met at ASU, and we worked on a lot of different projects together, especially during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. One of the projects that we worked on was called a LibKit. So we both worked at the library. I was a librarian. Julie was an instructional designer. And we wanted to create a module that could be put into any kind of class, because when you take a class, especially an online class, you have to go into a portal. And so the portal that ASU uses is Canvas. And we wanted to create a little module which basically introduced students to the library. And it was self-paced, and it included multimedia. It included all these different topics that could help them in their time here at ASU. Not here. There at ASU. Yeah. And it really hit its stride. We got a lot of traction from different faculty, but for whatever reason, our library didn't see the major importance of it beyond the pandemic. Totally ignoring the fact that they had a super huge online contingent that was basically being ignored up to that point. And we just, and there were a ton of other different factors that just went into it. It was just, going back to work when we really didn't see the need to be there every single day. There was just a lot of like irritating factors. And this literally came to me in a dream. I basically, in my dream, it was me, Julie, and then the other person that we were working with, Laura, in this conference room with all of these people, and we were throwing out ideas on what kind of projects we wanted to work on. And every time we hit a no, or we've tried that before, there's no need for that. And in my dream, this is Julie's favorite part.
It is my favorite part.
I literally stood up and flipped the table over, a la Housewives of New Jersey. And I was like, "You don't think that I can do this? Watch me." And I said that. I remember we were in
our cubicles, I think.
We were in our it was because there's a screenshot of the conversation. It's either in Slack, or Discord. And I told y'all about it, and Laura was the one that was like, "That's our name." And I was like, "That is our name." Yeah. So that's how Watch Me was born. It was born out of irritation and spite. So I think that's kind of, not to say that irritation drives us, but in a way that we are not satisfied. Yeah, we're not satisfied with the status quo. We do think that learning should be engaging, even if it's online, especially if it's online, especially in the year of our Lord 2023.
Yeah.
There should be people should have access to teaching and learning that works for them and can further their life.
I mean, that's the thing I think that sometimes gets lost. And that's a whole that's a whole, gosh, that could be a whole live, right? But the whole, kind of like online versus in person learning, right? Because, I mean, my personal pet peeve, because I've been doing this for such a long time, I've been creating online courses. I work for University of Phoenix. I worked for a company called Synergist that partners with a lot of smaller colleges. I worked for ASU Online for several years before coming to the library, and I got my master's online. So like, I'm a strong proponent for online learning. And so I feel like what happened in the emergency transition to remote, right, where everyone was kind of pushed into Zoom, there was this kind of backlash against online learning, but it was never designed to be online learning. What you had was a bunch of folks who had never taught online. That's not their fault, right? They just hadn't. And then imagine trying to shift your entire job. Well, you don't have to imagine. I'm sure most people on this call probably had that experience, right? Where like you've been doing something a certain way, you've designed it a certain way, and then all of a sudden on a dime you have to flip. I think folks had a week to kind of like emotionally prepare for what was about to happen. And so, a lot of people, like, we were all going through it. Like, that was a really rough time. And so people were just kind of like trying to continue what they've been doing in the class online. And like, I'm just going to say, like, a lecture where you're sitting in class 3 days a week with somebody talking at you for an hour and a half is boring in person, and it's boring on Zoom. So, and there's a lot of research.
Hot take.
Ooh, it's a hot take. It's spicy.
It's a spicy take.
Ooh, we're spicy today. But yeah. But I mean, there's research to back that up too, right? That's not just my opinion. Like, information retention from being lectured at is pretty abysmal if there's no application. And so, so it's, I kind of feel like there is a huge difference between, again, like just kind of a Zoom where you're being talked at for an hour, as opposed to something that is very specifically designed to be delivered asynchronously, right? Because especially then too, you can start to build in you can build in activities that were designed to be delivered online. It's just a different beast. So, I think that there is online learning can be hugely effective. Like I said, I got my master's online. I was working full time. There's absolutely no way. My husband got his bachelor's online too. And he works a variable shift job. So there's no way that either one of us could have done our degree programs in a traditional classroom. I can't, there's no way I could have driven an hour to park and then walk 20 minutes to my classroom and then do the whole thing in reverse, get home, feed myself somehow, and then get up and do the whole thing the next day. Again. So like,
it's soul sucking. Capitalism is so soul sucking, but that's also another live. But
yep. So
Sarah also has another question.
Oh yes.
As a person who seems to thrive in an in-person environment, I am interested in how you bridge the gap through online. Is it mostly interactive? Good question.
That is a really good question. And I think it's probably, first of all, maybe helpful to talk about like different modalities. So like asynchronous would be the, where you're logging into something like Canvas and you're taking all of the coursework like through the learning management system or through. So like, I guess self-paced is probably a better, less jargony way to put that. So, I think that is when you're very deliberately designing it, it doesn't have to be without interaction, right? So especially now, there are so many tools. You can build in, depending on where you're at, you can build in social media, right? So like a really big thing with asynchronous courses, might be like creating like a Facebook group or creating like some kind of discussion portal, right? Some people augment their asynchronous with like a fireside chat every week. So like folks can hop on and chat. So like you're doing the majority of the work in a fully self-paced format, right? But you still have that opportunity to have that face-to-face. And, actually there is also really good point in mentioning like online's not for everyone, especially, and I feel like maybe talking about like online training is a little bit different because especially if you're trying to upskill in a specific area, right? Like you need to learn something, or if there's something you kind of feel like you have a weakness in, right? There's something to be said, I think, for like, I just have like 20 minutes in my day to carve out some time for this. So having a bank of online, of learning modules that you can take or can be really helpful in those cases where it's like you're just kind of fitting in the training or the learning like in the time that you have available to you. But I don't know. I will say honestly, I probably to a certain extent, like online, if we're talking about like maybe like a formal degree program or certification or something like that, I think that a lot of times it may be convenience that drives you to that. It may be that you don't have the time in your day to again, like drive to a face-to-face location to do that. I think there's something to be said for having that available to folks who do want to have that face-to-face component, right? So I'm not an advocate for online like replacing face-to-face. Like you have to, I'm thinking about like a nursing program, right? Like there's a hands-on component. Like you have to learn how to draw blood. You have to learn how to do like physical procedures. So that's where it may be a hybrid, like some elements of it, like the more theoretical elements of it, or, you can create, like I supported the speech and hearing sciences program at ASU, and I created it was a multimedia piece using a tool called Storyline, where they actually simulated delivering a hearing test. So they had to go, there was like the machine with a dial, and they had to go through the process of dialing up, because there's a very specific process you have to take. In terms of like how far you dial up until they hear it, then you dial back, and like so they could kind of simulate practicing on an actual machine. It's more interesting, I think, to do something like that than just like a quiz. I mean, we could have like how many decibels do you dial up before you dial back? Like we could have done that in a quiz, but we wanted to create something that was more real world, right? But then of course, like at a certain point you actually do need to like deliver the test to someone. You need to actually have a live person. So I think that's where you can have like a hybrid approach. But I don't know, I'm such an introvert. I really liked that my program was online. Like I liked that I could think about things. I would rather truly, like in a class, like especially like a big lecture hall, like I would literally like I would rather tunnel my way to the center of the earth than raise my hand and talk in front of a big group of people.
That's fair. I will say too that like certain industries that are in person, like for instance retail, there is like Julie was saying, there is a portion that does have to be in person because the job is in person. However, we work with a lot of folks who do have in-person aspects to the training that they want.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
But then also, you're pushing buttons, Julie.
Yeah,
stop.
Sorry. I was trying to turn on the live captions. It just realized I didn't turn on the captions. Anyway, sorry.
Next time.
Yep.
Lessons learned. However, there are ways that we want to use online learning to what we call fail safe. And that means that, for instance, in the case of like retail, especially in customer interactions or customer scenarios, you have, there's a difference between learning about how to deal with a difficult customer in theory than in practice. And that's where we feel like online we can come up with these different scenarios and students can see in real time how their decisions can impact not only that situation, but their coworkers. And that's something that we can definitely talk more about in another live when it comes to like some of the cool tools that we use to do that. But yeah, and I think that it's like to Julie's point, I think that there's people who are going to prefer to have in-person learning, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's we just feel as though there's a lot of businesses that do rely on the in-person, and we're in 2023 and remote is a thing. So
yeah, that's the other thing too that I think online can be really helpful with, like thinking about a small business that is, you kind of like, I feel like, you're kind of at a certain level until all of a sudden you're not, right? Like you're kind of like, you're doing your thing. And then all of a sudden you get this big contract, and then it's like, whoop, like, okay, like we gotta scale, like we gotta go, we gotta hire people, we gotta do the whole thing. And that can be really hard. I mean, I think probably like how many of us have trained people, right? Have had to train. It's really hard to carve out time in your day to train new people, especially if you do a lot of people at once. Yes. And so, I mean, that was something that I had done at the library. And I actually, huge credit to my colleague, Mary Shaban Arcuria, who actually, she was very gracious to share with me a training that she had created at Ed Plus for at ASU for instructional design associates. And so she shared that it was a fantastic series of modules that really took folks who were relatively new through like the theory of instructional design, best practices, culture of the department. And so she shared that with me. I was able to modify it for the library and add in some of the specific stuff that like we covered. And then I was able to layer in some activities. Like I had folks kind of like go through it, and there was some stuff that they submitted to me so I could kind of spot check it. But it was it really saved my life because I was in the middle of a big project, and I just didn't have the time. So the fact that like I could, you know, kind of like I could assign that to folks and then know that we were still going to be able to have conversations based on the information that was delivered. But it was like I didn't have to deliver it, and I certainly didn't have to do that over and over and over. So a lot of that stuff is evergreen, right? And then of course I can update it if things change. But that was a huge time saver. So again, it can really help a business, I think, scale quickly, especially when those things come in, those contracts come in, you have to hire quickly. It's just thinking about like your staff, your managers, your folks who will actually have to train people on the ground. Like it's such a huge gift, I feel like, if you can take at least some of that work off of their plate. And
truthfully, yeah. And like to go back to our original point of this whole live, is that like I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. But no, it's, you know, we talk about scaling, and like for us as a small business, like this is also forcing us to think about like what's going to happen when we get to a point where we need to add somebody. Like what's going to happen when we're at capacity. Because right now, Julie and I have part-time jobs that we're you know, we're getting some guaranteed income coming in.
Yep.
But this is very much like, this is our baby. And
we're practicing what we preach too.
I know.
We're creating trainings. I'm working on onboarding training right now in the anticipation that we will bring someone on. So, you know, this is something we're actively thinking about, but not just recommending for other people. This is something we're definitely
putting it into practice
for ourselves as well.
Yeah. But,
do we want to talk about any of the resources that we've come across in this year?
Sure. Yeah. So for those of you who are rewatching this live, and who are looking to start your own business, some of the resources that have been invaluable to us, one is SCORE, which I don't know what the acronym for that is, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put these in the chat because people can
I believe it's score.org.
Score.org.
But yeah, we actually found out about them through the Small Business Administration. They're a partner with the Small Business Administration, and they've been invaluable to us. We were able to hook up with a couple of mentors for free through SCORE. I mean, sometimes I can't believe all this stuff is free, but we had a couple of mentors who were really helpful, especially at the beginning when we were doing all the, you know, setting stuff up, trying to figure out, like, we didn't even have a bank account at that point. And shout out to Jan, our mentor through SCORE. You know, we were doing some stuff, we were putting some stuff on our personal credit card, right? And she's like, don't do that. Don't do that. Get a bank account. Make sure you're putting all your business expenses on your actual business credit or debit card, because, you know, if you know, God forbid we were sued, you know, it's like a judge might look at that and say, well, you're not really a business, right? Because you're using there's no separation between your business and your personal finances, right? So, so just a lot of stuff like that, you know, how we
coming up with expense reports.
All that.
Yeah, stuff. all of the administrative things that you have no idea what you need to do. SCORE will help you out with that.
Yeah, and webinars, like tons of webinars, just like amazing resources.
Sarah coming at us with all these amazing questions. Thank you. Would you recommend hiring a lawyer right away, or is it doable by yourself through research? Okay, so I have a kind of a long answer to this. Lawyers are invaluable, but they're also extremely expensive. So what we did, I actually went online on our public library's website So this is phoenixpubliclibrary.org, I believe. And they have databases. One of these databases is a legal database, and it's also connected to the Arizona State Library, and they have legal forms that are already pre-populated. So it has all of like the legalese in there. And so what Julie and I did was we downloaded these and we kind of filled in the blanks. That way, when we went to a lawyer and we were like, hey, we have this thing that we would like for you to review, because they charge by the hour. Mm-hmm. So instead of coming at it from scratch, we already had something that they could work with. And so that drastically cut the cost.
Mm-hmm. Oh, also too, like it's wild to say this, but ChatGPT didn't exist. Well, it may have existed in some form, right?
But we didn't know about it.
Not like it does now, right? And I mean, ChatGPT is not a lawyer, but certainly, I mean, we've done that. We've queried ChatGPT for some stuff that we've been able to include in contracts and, you know, clauses and different things. And that's something you would want to have a lawyer look at, right? But again, like having a lawyer review something is very different cost-wise than having them generate it. So ChatGPT can be really, really helpful, especially, hey, can you generate a clause that, you know, denotes like, you know, how the payment plan schedule is going to work, right? And it will come up with some really good verbiage, and then, just have a lawyer check it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that is a really great question. Another resource that we took advantage of was the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce here in Arizona. So it's the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Fire networking events. They have at least 2 networking events a month. And that was a place where I learned about the Dream Builders program. It is a program that is geared towards women and people of color who are starting their own business. They're at various stages of their entrepreneurship journey, and they go through this class that is all about creating a business plan. So by the end of it, you have a business plan, and then we got a laptop, which was amazing. And we also got a mentor. So our mentor, shout out to Roxanne Montoya of AVM Systems here in Phoenix, Arizona. She has been amazing in providing a sounding board for us. She's also now one of our clients.
Yeah,
we're working on a project with her, and we're really excited about that. But yeah, so and then also the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce as well also has amazing events and a lot of opportunities to grow and learn. We are not officially members yet, but that is incoming, and we definitely want to take advantage of what they have to offer in this upcoming year. And
the Prestamos Women's Business Center has been extremely helpful as well.
The Prestamos Women's Business Center, they're over here on like Buckeye and 10th Street. And they are also affiliated with Chicanos por la Causa and Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. So like all of this, like, I love it. It's all like La Raza. And like, I think that that's so amazing, because if you look at the statistics, don't quote me on it, but I think like 80% of businesses that are owned by minorities fail within the first 2 years. We do not want to become that statistic. So they have a ton of resources that we've been able to take advantage of. We also got set up with a mentor through that as well. Shout out to Eric Franco. And I think that's his business, is Eric Franco.
I believe so.
Yeah, and then he's down in Tucson, so we work remotely with him. Just a lot of different. We've been very blessed with finding all of these different resources. So we do want to be able to share that with folks who are interested in starting their own business.
Yeah, the Burton Barr Library also has a small business center, which they threw a big expo, which is how we found out about some of these things. So I just, it's when we first started too, I think we didn't, I think we just kind of had this, we'll start, we'll network, but it was all very general, right? And it's kind of like the more we uncovered, the more services we uncovered, the more, and I give you huge credit for that because you really kind of started the ball rolling on that. But there really are a lot of resources out there for people who are starting small businesses. And I just can't, I think I probably speak for us both when I say like, I can't say enough for that. It's just any free opportunity you get, take it. Any course you can take it. Any resource, any mentorship, any of that kind of stuff, especially if it's through something like SCORE, Prestamos, or something that, especially if it's free,
yeah, for sure.
It's all a great learning experience. And yeah, you might not gel with every single person. You might not agree with every single piece of advice, but it's just, the more you do it, the more you get feedback, the more you get, you get to kind of like test your ideas and get feedback on your ideas, the more you get to consider, the more people you get introduced to.
And I also think like for someone like, I mean, I hate to admit it, but I am kind of a baby when it comes to like critical feedback. And it's because I'm a Virgo, okay? But so what I have really appreciated is the community that the small business community that we have here in Phoenix, and then also in Arizona. Like if somebody comes at you with, I mean, not to say that we've had bad ideas per se, but like I feel like people have been very gentle with us and been like, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Mm-hmm. And so it's definitely not like Shark Tank or like what Julie and I call being business sharks, where you're like, no, like you suck, like kill it, whatever, and it's like, no, that's not how we roll. So
that was kind of, I think, one of my biggest fears when we really started networking. It's just that like I didn't like that's just not either one of us.
That's not our vibe.
That's not our vibe, and it's just we're not going to thrive in that kind of environment. So it's been really gratifying to find out that a lot of folks who that we're moving through these systems with are they're just very nice people, very genuine people. And it's been, I think also too, like we've been able to pivot, like you said, we've been able to pivot a few times, because I think when we first launched, it was this idea of like, we're going to work with businesses to create custom trainings. And everyone needs custom, and everyone does need custom trainings. But, it's, I think we kind of had this, we can build like all kinds of like HR trainings. We could do this, we could do that. But, people rightfully pointed out in the beginning that like, well, really, if I need a course on sexual harassment, there's several like out of the box courses that I can purchase.
Yeah, through these like very well known names.
Yeah, and that and it's they're ready, right? Whereas the approach we take, because we're building custom courses, it takes a little bit longer, because it's very collaborative. We really have to work with the organization, work with the subject matter expert, and like really there's a lot of discussions that we have to have, and it's really fun work, but it takes time, right? So that really kind of helped us pivot early on, like, okay, that's not our market, like we're not looking necessarily to compete with like these big names and especially areas like legal compliance areas, like HR topics on certain sexual harassment, this kind of thing. Like, so that helped us pivot, right? That really helped us think a little bit more deeply about, okay, like what exactly is the need. The other thing we're going through, there's an organization, they're based out of Scottsdale and DC, called SeedSpot, and they're an incubator for businesses that have like a social impact kind of like focus to their mission statement. And so we're going through an innovation incubator. It's an 8-week program, and that has actually found out about them kind of like circuitously through. And this is what I mean, like just keep your eyes open, I got a card from Prestamos, the Prestamos Women's Business Center at the Phoenix, the Burton Bar Library. And I went home and I looked it up, and then, realized I was eligible to apply. So I applied, and then I got an email with like, here's our list of events. And I saw they were having these amazing webinars. And so, it was in partnership with SeedSpot. And so I was like, great, like they're free and all these fantastic topics. So I signed up. It was a spring training. They called it the spring training series. So I signed up, and then I got an email that like, oh yeah, like we're doing some promotions. Like if you attend a certain so if you attend one, you get like some freebies, some helpful resources. If you attended 2 events, you got access to SeedSpots. They have like a 2-day sort of like very intensive is the word I would use, not truncated, like intensive, kind of like mini innovation incubator. Oh, I can't talk. But so that was a fantastic prize. But then if you attended 3 sessions and then also spoke to an advisor for 30 minutes, again, for free, you got a $500 mini grant. And so literally, I mean, I was attending these things anyway, and I ended up qualifying. I got $500, like 500 free grant dollars.
Free bucks.
And then I attended the Seed Spot, the mini retreat, and I really liked it. It was really helpful. It was a great curriculum. They had a pitch competition. It was really cool. I got to practice my pitch. And they also too were doing a thing where if you applied that mini grant to this longer incubator, that they would match the grant for a twin. So we're going through it now. We really, it's the first week, but like that's been really, really helpful. So just keep your eyes open, because you never know. It's like bing, bing, boom, and all of a sudden I have $500 in the business account. Like, it was pretty cool.
Yes. I did not account for this before we went live, but what do we do if one of us has to go to the bathroom?
Well, I mean, should we actually, I think we might be kind of to a logical point where we want to wrap up, because we've been on here for
45 minutes.
And that's been a long, I think we're only scheduled for 30. So this might be a logical place to wrap up anyway.
Thank you, Sarah, for coming and asking so many good questions. I really do appreciate you.
Yeah, and thanks everyone else who's been on the live. We really are grateful to everyone who's attended, and anyone who might be watching this later on. We are really grateful for all of you. We hope we're able to give a little something back as a result of our adventures. So
stay tuned. We're gonna be live every week, God willing.
Yes.
And we have various topics. Y'all are incredibly knowledgeable, and I love to see how interwoven in the community you are. Yes, thank you so much, Sarah. And we do appreciate all of our supporters, all of our family and friends who have been sounding boards and shoulders to cry on throughout this whole experience. You're loved more than you know. So with that being said, oh my God, I was going to get emotional. But with that being said, we do have lives every week, and we will post topics on our social media, and interact with us there. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook. I think that's it. But
Facebook, LinkedIn.
Facebook and LinkedIn. Yep. All right, but we will see you all later. Thank you so much for tuning in, and
talk to you later. Thanks, everyone. Bye.